But let's pause for a moment and begin with prayer. Let us pray. Blessed and loving Lord, we come before you tonight excited about the opportunities that are in front of us and a bit concerned about our ability to carry out the ministry you're giving us. We ask that you remind us that it's ultimately all in your hands, but we ask that you empower us, encourage us, and most of all, give us just the right words to say when we do have the opportunity to talk to people who want to know about your love. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, if everybody will mute themselves.
Okay.
And I will share screen. That isn't what I wanted to do. And we are recording this if you missed that when you came on. And I will share the recording when I can, fairly soon. All right. As I said, mute yourself. This is a title you'll see throughout. And to me, this kind of encompasses what we're talking about. That if we think about all the people that go by our church, drive by, walk by, whatever, or we have interactions with, and I don't mean talking to, but just passing on the street, they're just shadowy figures. They don't have any connection to us, but we want to change that and make them friends that have faces and names that we can invite to church, invite to ministry. That's where we're going. And today, what I'm going to focus on is talking about what our goals are and not what we might normally consider our goals. We're going to talk about evangelism versus pre-evangelism. And that pre-evangelism, that's my terminology. You won't see it a whole lot from a whole lot of other people. We're going to look at the challenges we face. And this is important because there are people in your church and maybe even people on today who are thinking, well, nobody really wants to be connected to church anymore. Nobody cares about what we're talking about. And that's a challenge. But there are also opportunities that God is presenting to us, and we'll talk about those. Then there's a process I will show you, kind of a brief overview of. As we go through this, there'll be several simple, immediately implementable ideas, things you can do right now. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about next week's class and give you a couple teasers about the kind of things we'll be talking about then. And then first question most people have is, will it work? Well, with about 90% certainty, I can show you how to bring people to and sometimes into your doors. The goal for all we do is not to increase attendance or budget, which is where, if you were to ask what the goals are, that's probably where most people would go. But they're not, because those are selfish goals. Those are for us. They're not for other people. And Jesus said, we just heard in the last couple of weeks, love your neighbor. Those are what we want to do. We want to help people grow closer to God. And if we do that, if we show God's love by word and example, some people, not everybody, not even a majority, but some people will want to associate with us. And when that happens, our side benefits include more people to help with ministry, more attendance, and income increase. And I want to focus on that first one for just a second, because it will not be unusual for people to come forward and want to help when we make the invitation to help with the food pantry, for example. They might do that for months before they attend on a Sunday, or they may never attend on a Sunday. They may just want to help with the ministry. This slide, for those who've been with me before, you're familiar with it, but I want to just re-emphasize it. I'll show you it again later on. And that's to remind you, you're not going to do everything I'm going to mention today. It's just not possible. Nobody can. But you need to pick what seems most important within your context. And that context includes how many people you have to work with. It includes the community around you. It includes your budget, all that kind of stuff. Find one thing to do well rather than three things poorly. That's the key. Do not overwhelm yourself and just stop in frustration, because you're never alone. I hate being alone when I'm working on something and I have a question and there's nobody I can go to for help. Well, you'll always be able to go to me. I don't know everything, but I have a lot of people on my phone list that do know just about everything. So probably I can get you an answer. Language shapes who we are, and it shapes how we behave. And if you get your head around a couple of these things, you've pretty much understood where we're going on a major part of what we'll talk about. And the first one is really important. You never have a visitor. We only have guests. And I invite you to think about the difference in your home between having a visitor come to your home and have somebody you've invited to come over to a barbecue or something. And that is a guest. We treat them very, very, very differently. And in the same line, we do not greet people. We don't just simply say, hi, glad you're here this morning. Here's your bulletin. End of story. Same thing with your house. If somebody comes over, you've invited them for a barbecue, we host them. We treat them differently. Then we tried our best to avoid, or at the very least explain, all the jargon the Episcopal Church uses, and there's a bunch of it. My definition of jargon is any word you have not used in the last 2 weeks outside of church community. In other words, you probably will never say Maundy, Thursday, or BCP, or Eucharist, or Rite One, except if you're talking about church. So that makes it jargon. And the key on this is the question, do we want people to understand and be comfortable? Or, and this is a direct quote, if they are good enough, they will come back and learn. That's, I heard that and I just went ballistic. But that's our attitude a lot of times. Well, they just stick around a while, they'll learn. No, they're not, because they're not going to stick around. And then the word church. No matter how often we say the church is the people, in reality, we use it to mean the building or the institution. If I say I'm going to church, that means I'm going to the building. If I say I work for the church, I'm talking about the institution. So I try to use spiritual home or congregation whenever possible, and just to be alert to the use of the word church, which has so many negative implications, so many negative feelings toward it. All right, one couple phrases I'll use. Previously churched. These are people for whom church was important at some point in their life. And a lot of people have started to use the phrase dones. They are done with church. You probably have heard the phrase none. They have no relationship to any denomination. They're nuns. Well, now they're using the word dones. Never church people, never attended on any regular basis. And this is different from the nuns, because somebody says they no longer have any relationship to a church. They may have had at one point, but I'm talking about people who never attended on any regular basis. I guess I can tell this story because it's not private. My grandchildren would qualify as never churched, even though 2 of them are baptized. But that was the last time they were ever in church. They were baptized for their grandmother and grandfather's benefit, which is, unfortunate, but it's so common. Well, these 2 groups of people are different. And if we're talking to somebody one-on-one, we can approach them differently depending on their background. But when we're talking about the entire city or area, we don't have that option. So I focus on the never churched, because if we touch them, if we explain things to them, we will have touched the previously churched person. Evangelism to me is a series of deep conversations about spirituality. The key here is this requires the listener to trust the speaker. I personally believe every human being was created by God with a desire to know God better. Therefore, if we help in that process, we are actually helping them do what ultimately they want to do, and they will want to be in relationship with us. But if we don't help, there's no reason for them to connect with us or stay. So as I said, with about 90% certainty, I can show you how to bring people to and sometimes into your doors. But if they find nothing when they get there, they're not going to stay. So pre-evangelism, as I said, this is my terminology. Pre-evangelism is building that trusting relationship, creating the atmosphere, if you will. And what happens too often is we think all we have to do is invite people to worship or a Bible study, and they'll come a-running. Well, that doesn't happen very often. I won't say it never happens, but it doesn't happen very often because they don't trust either Christians or Christianity. So pre-evangelism is a step. It's not the goal. It's foundational. It has to happen, but it's still only a step. So the question is, if God created all human beings with a desire to grow closer to God, why aren't our churches full? And the answer is, we are not trusted. Christians and churches have a very bad reputation among many people. And at this point, I know some people are going, oh, he's overemphasizing the point. That's not really true. Well, this is what we normally, or they tend to see when they're looking at news releases. And I could redo this slide anytime because there's always something new. But you have sexual misconduct. You have attacks on women. You have attacks on the Jews and gay people. And you have churches that are dominated by politics, and that's on both sides. It's not just one side. One side tends to get a little more publicity, but it happens on both sides. And people say, why would I want to be associated with that kind of group? This is a study the Episcopal Church paid for not long ago. It's very good, very well done. And the question was asked, what characteristics do you associate with Christians in general? And those who said they were not religious answered, those who were different religion answered, and then people, I'm going from right to left, people who say they were Christian answered. And the not religious, pretty much, maybe even a little better than I would have expected. But the one that gets me is this one on the left-hand side. What do Christians say about Christians? And Bishop Curry, the paragraph on the bottom is Bishop Curry's response. And he's trying to put a positive, I love Bishop Curry, but in this case, I'm not sure I agree with him. He's trying to put a positive spin on it. And that 57% of Christians say Christians are giving. Okay, that's good. 56% say compassionate, 55% loving, etc. But look at the flip side. 43% of Christians would not say Christians are giving. 44% of Christians would not say Christians are compassionate. We have a bad reputation even among our own people. And what this is going on is people may be sitting in their congregation thinking to themselves, well, we're very compassionate, but those other people out there are not. But if that's what Christians think about Christians, what would the non-Christians think? This is a good little slide to use if you want to have a little discussion with your congregations. Basically, I listed the 7 or 8 primary reasons people do not want to be associated with a church. And the way to use it is a good exercise is the old sticky note exercise. Put each of the words up on the wall and have people write notes that say why your congregation is not hypocritical or is not exclusive. Now, if you do this, don't eliminate the friendly one. Just cross that one out. Because if you don't, everybody's going to focus on that. Everybody thinks they're the friendliest church in town. So you want to be able to focus on deeper questions. So our challenges become, why would you associate with the people I just described? And why would you expect others to do so? Well, This is what they think of when your church is mentioned. When you say some Saint somewhere Episcopal Church, the word church is what comes across. So with all that negativism, do we have any hope? Any hope at all? Yeah, there is. There's a great deal of hope if we make the effort. Because the good news is people can distrust and even despise church while loving your congregation. Let me say that again. All those negative things are true, but people can still believe them, and there's a lot of truth to many of them, but they can still love your congregation. That's one of the reasons I say we need to be careful about words, talking about the congregation versus church. What are opportunities? Because, I hear it said that, yeah, that's true. There's a few people, but it's very few people who we can get interested. Well, that's not true. So let's look at the data. This is broad, general. You can get different numbers, but they're all in the same ballpark. Roughly about 10% of Americans do not believe in God. And that's because many of the people we call none or done believe in God. They just don't believe in the institutional church. Something around a quarter, I just use 23% because the math works out, of people have a fulfilling spiritual home. They have a place. It may be a mosque, it may be a temple, maybe most of the time in America it's a Christian church, but it could be a 12-step program. But about a quarter of the people, let's say 23%, believe in God. So 2 of 3 Americans believe in God, but do not have a spiritual home. All those people believe in God, but don't have a place to grow closer to God, a community to grow closer to God within. So in broad sense, what you have is, again, about a third of the people either don't believe in God or they've got a good location, a good situation, which means about a third of Americans believe in God but have no interest in deepening their spiritual lives. And about a third of Americans are willing to talk to us. Now, obviously, there's a lot of variation there. Some are very excited to talk to us. Some are reluctant but willing. None of them are particularly anxious, because if they were anxious to talk about spirituality, they would be doing so. It's not high on their priority list. They're not likely to attend on Sunday or other activities at first. They're very cautious, very untrusting, and as I said, with good reason. There's certainly plenty of places I don't want to be associated with. But if they feel respected and if it touches on their life concerns, they are willing to talk, maybe even more than willing. We have to help them become interested enough to participate. This is another study that was recently done, gives you basically the same answer, just real quick. Barna is a evangelical research organization. They have good stuff. You have to be careful with their language because they use language in a little different way than we do. For example, when they talk about ministry, they're talking about bringing people into your church, inviting people to worship with them. We use the term ministry in a much broader context. So, there's some translations needed, but most of their stuff is pretty solid. Excuse me. And you notice basically we've broken down into thirds again, that about a third of Americans are very low interest in talking about spirituality. That would be those who don't believe in God, obviously, and those who are they're too busy to even think about it. And then we have about a third have a high interest in talking about spirituality. Now, this would be the people who are already in a church or a mosque or whatever, but it would also be people who are anxious to talk about spirituality. That's a small group that aren't already in a spiritual home but are interested, but it's certainly a group we want to be in touch with. And then in their numbers, say 39%, I said 33%, somewhere in that ballpark, are people of a moderate interest. And those are, and I hate this terminology, But those are our target audience. Those are the ones primarily. Those are the ones we can reach out and engage with, and over time begin to have a relationship with. So what potential is there for your church, your specific church? We said lots of people near your church, a third of the population, are willing to talk. Near your church, about a 20-minute travel time. Most people attending church now, it's a little more than that in a rural area, but most people attending a church are coming from no more than 20 minutes. So there's always a few outliers. A few people will travel 45 minutes to the church and that kind of thing. But 20 minutes is a reasonable target distance. So how many is that? Well, I can't work it out. I can work it out if you ask me. I will be happy to give you some numbers for your congregation. But here's two sources, and I sent you the slides, and I will send you an updated set of slides in the next day or two that have two sources for the information. I'm almost embarrassed to say the Nazarene source is better than our own General Convention of the Episcopal Church source, only because the General Convention, our source, is focused more on social ministry. In other words, if you wanted to know what percentage of your neighbors are food insecure, they have that kind of information. But finding out how many individuals that is very difficult. Whereas the Nazarene starts with the number of people. Now, its information is a little old, but you can easily get a ballpark, and it's fairly easy to extend it and bring it up to something that's reasonably close. And you can go to lots of other places for this information. If you just go to the library, most of the time their research people can sit down with you and in a few minutes help you get some of this basic information. The nice thing about these sources is you can do that distance, whereas the library would only have it by census tracts, which may or may not be a good way to look at your community. Key point number 2, if people really wanted to attend, if all they needed was to know the service times, they would have been in your church last Sunday. And yet how often we think, we invite people to come because our roadside sign has our worship times. That's not sufficient. We need to intrigue them enough. We got to interest them enough so that they want to know the worship times. We start with the worship times thinking we can then interest them. No, it's the other way around. We have to interest them, then they want to know the worship times. So how do we take this opportunity of a third of the people, third of our neighbors, and reach those with negative attitudes? I like this 3-stage process. And remember, this is a very general process in the sense that you're really doing all the stages at any one moment, but it helps to think it through, I think, this way. The first stage, the one in yellow, is to intrigue people. Here's where we're trying to interest them enough so they begin to know us, like us, and most importantly, get to the point where they trust us at least a little bit. They trust us enough to be in conversation with us. They may not trust us enough to interact with us directly. The second phase is interacting with us. The third phase is then we can relate with them. And that is by far the single most important stage. And I will say that over and over again. The relate phase is the most important, or stage is the most important. And that's partially because just about every church, at least on rare occasions, has a new person come in the door. And then we wonder, well, what happened? The Smiths were with us a couple months ago, but we haven't seen them since. They just came the one time. Well, that's because we didn't relate with them. They came in and they offered themselves to us, if you will, and we turned down the offer. Now, one of the problems we run into is you'll run into people in the congregation, possibly on the vestry or the council if you're Lutheran, people who expect instant results. Well, we ran 2 Facebook ads and nobody knew us come in the door. It's a waste of time. it takes time. And that's another key point. It's going to take time, because this is what we typically do, whether it's in person or online. We make people feel like ghosts. They just kind of float through our consciousness, and that's the end of it. We need to build a relationship. And the fact that we send a letter to them the first week thanking them for attending, if that's the end of the efforts, that's a tad bit better than not doing anything, but it's really not much. So the process chronologically is to intrigue, interact, and relate. But from an importance point of view, it's relate, interact, and intrigue. If we don't relate well to the people, then the fact that we interacted with them, that they came to a blessing of the animals or something, is irrelevant. And if we don't interact with them, then the fact that we interested them, we intrigued them, is not relevant. So we have to look at it for this size. If we don't build a relationship, we'll have largely wasted our time. So how do we relate? Well, the key is communication. Anybody that's ever done or been in marriage counseling or any other kind know it's all about communication. In this case, we're talking about regular, consistent, friendly, personal, gentle, engaging, and short. I think those are all important characteristics, which means we're not going to just send them a message every Saturday saying, come to church tomorrow. Occasionally, we'll touch on that theme, but not every time. Unfortunately, email is very likely to accomplish these goals for the simple reason that few emails are open. Research, and there's a lot of this research out there, says about 20 to 25% of people actually click on the email. Whether or not they ever read it is still another question. Texting is a bit more difficult to do, but more likely to be effective. A text is seen 90% plus of the time. And since they know it's going to be short, most people read it. I say it's more difficult because you have to be concise. You can't write about, in an email, the tendency is to write about everything that's going on in the church. And you got 17 items you're talking about. Text, you can pick one of those. The recipient more likely to pay attention because it's short and it's focused. It can be personal. All that said, if all you have is their email address, certainly use it. Don't give up. Here's some sample texts that we've sent out over time. I'm going to go over all of them. I put in blue kind of what the theme was. There's ones we send out the first time. We've just gotten their contact information, maybe from an event, maybe from Sunday. We talk about some things that are just plain fun. We talk about something about the service on occasion. We ask them to donate, and that does happen. We provide some information about the church. A lot of our churches have fascinating histories. Let's tell the people this, the ministry, and then inspirational things. Now, what I want to point out to you is this here. Well, there's a couple of them. What that is it's a reduced website address. So in other words, if you wanted to send out something about the history, you don't have to put the whole history in the text. You give them an introduction, and then they say, now go here for more information. And we've all seen that kind of thing, where you say, if you want more, click here. Well, that's basically what that does. But some people think texting is invasive. I don't, primarily because they have multiple opportunities to opt out. Your contact card, which I'll show you in a moment, should give them the option to not receive text from you. Now, I strongly urge you to use the opt-out option, not the opt-in. In other words, make them say they don't want it. Don't make them say whether or not they want it. Because simply put, there's a big chunk, probably 60, 70% of the people you'll deal with will be kind of wishy-washy about whether they not want to be on your list. Don't make it hard for them to be on the list. And I can show you lots of different churches we've worked with. About 80% or more of the people who originally give us their contact information stay in touch. In other words, only about 20% end up opting out. I recommend a paid system. And this is another example of when they'll have a chance to opt out, is under the law, the paid company has to send what's called a compliance text. You may have gotten some of these. This is when they send out something that says, you have asked to be receive information from your nearby church. Do you still want to do that? Or some phrase like that. That's going to happen, and it gives them the option of checking out. Every text includes the stop option, and any paid system must comply with it under law. And again, you've seen it, unsubscribe, stop, the exact language varies. Bottom line is, don't worry about those who don't want to hear from you. If politely asking that, let me say that again. If politely asking to send them information upsets them, they weren't coming back anyway. I used to worry about being all things to all people. And then I realized, there's some people that just aren't interested. And that doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they aren't interested. So quit worrying about them. Now, if you want to know how to decide if what you're doing is working, I think a good evaluation is, are they still connected to a church a year after you've gotten their contact information? In other words, if you got their contact information last Christmas Eve, are they active in your church now? That's kind of the goal. So, question, how many of last year's Christmas guests are active with you today? In fact, do you even know who was a guest last Christmas? And one of the things I'll talk about next week is how, in a real irony, Christmas Eve is one of the times you're most likely to see guests, and it's one of the worst times to greet them. We do the worst possible job on the biggest day of the year. And I'll talk about that some next week. But typically less than 10% of first-time guests will be connected to the church 1 year later. And most of them will be the previously churched or the never churched. And that's, again, because we didn't build a relationship. We ghosted them. It's essential, therefore, that we get their contact information. Without that, you can't control, you never can control, but you can influence their decision about whether or not to connect with your church. The name and the cell phone number is best, and I have lots of materials on how to do that. I'll show you some as we go through, but there's a lot more. Ask for what you need. Asking for too much means fewer people will respond. Lots of research on that again. If you're asking for 6 or 7 pieces of information, people are just going to give up, not do it. I usually do ask for email and zip code in addition to the name and the phone number. But never, what church are you from? And I still see that in many churches in their guest book in the narthex. That can be insulting. If I haven't been in church in 20 years, that's kind of an insulting question to ask. Or if I'm leaving the church down the road, that's kind of insulting. Never. Names and ages of kids, that's downright creepy, particularly with the history of abuse we keep on hearing about. And somebody will say, oh, but I got to know that to plan Sunday school. You can find that out when you know them a little better and they're likely to come to Sunday school. And never, this one bothers me, but I agree with it, physical address. People are very concerned about privacy. They don't want you dropping it. Again, you can get that later. The zip code gives you a hint at their location, which is why I include that. You find out, are they from another state or the next county or whatever. And I'll give you some examples in just a minute. So here's our follow-up communication, the summary. One is it's absolutely key. If we don't do it, we've largely wasted everything else we did. The importance is to be regular, friendly, short. I recommend texting typically once a week. Emails just are not responded to very much. And I recommend that most texts not be in the theme of hope to see you Sunday. Our goal is to tell a story, tell the story of the church, have people. I like to say if people have read our texts for 2 or 3 months, they ought to have a feel for who we are. So they're only getting a little bit each week, but over time they should get it. Don't worry about it. There's lots of good free material available. And I've shown you some in the list I showed you. I'll show you some more in a minute. And I would recommend, and this is something, if you're interested, talk to me because I don't have time to really spend on it tonight. You have a list of people you've not seen in a long time. Don't ignore them. Reach out to them once. Say, we're starting texting. We'd like to text to you occasionally. You might be surprised how many will stay with you. And if they don't, if they opt out, fine. You've learned that they have no interest at all. So for everything you do, every single activity, and I'm going to mention some, and you'll probably be surprised. How can I meet new people through this activity? Everything that goes on through the church, that question should be asked. Not just see them, not just greet them, but actually meet them. So our goals for any activity, this is Sunday morning, this is Blessing of the Animals, this is the church bazaar, anything at all, is have people attend, have people be glad they came, have people learn about your church, and that's the one we most frequently miss, and have people leave their contact information, and we usually miss that one too. So my question to you is, how many people came to your last yard sale or bazaar? How many people, not members of your church, not people you otherwise knew, strangers, came to your last yard sale or bazaar? How many of those people did you see or greet? Just say hi, good morning, glad you're here. How many did you meet? And I'm defining that as exchange of names. How many are now actively ministering with you? Because it is possible for people to make the leap from the yard sale buyer or the bazaar buyer to becoming an active member. If we're willing to put a little work into it, that can happen. Think of all the people you had an opportunity to get to know and to encourage to come to your church that did not happen because it never occurred to anybody to approach the yard sale buyer. All right, the third one I mentioned was have people learn about your church. So that question in blue really applies. What do people leave knowing about your church they did not know when they arrived? And having a couple brochures available is not. But for anything you're doing, again, if they're just coming in for, to vote today, what do they leave your church knowing they did not know when they arrived? And for example, a yard sale or bazaar might have a booth in between the clothing and the furniture or whatever that explains things about the youth group or how your church works to make the world better. These two numbers you're going to hear more than once tonight, and that's you have half a second to grab their attention. And when it's a walk-by type of thing, like I was saying, a booth in between a couple things at the bazaar, they have to grab their attention from 6 feet away, which means graphics with few words. And I'll show you some examples in just a minute. I want you to think about this. We need to be assertive. We need to keep working at it, but we never want to be aggressive. So here's a couple things that were done at a church. The banner, God's work, our hands, is kind of a Lutheran tagline, if you will. And that's the half a second. That's what grabs people's attention. They go, oh, and then what's in black on above and beneath it kind of explains that out. Now, this banner could be used any number of occasions. On the right-hand side, it's being used at a plant sale, at a flower sale. And at the same sale, we had some big pictures up. Now, the font on the pictures is not good. That's something, live and learn. But the first one is meant to show making the world better. It's their food pantry. The ones on the right, the top is the youth group that was working on, I don't even remember what project it was. They were working on some project at the time. And then below, this particular church has some music they're very proud of. So it mentions that. Notice the worship service in and of itself isn't really focused on. It's the ministries is what's focused on. And as I say, the point was made in under a second. What I want to say is these can be used at any event. And you could use them as people enter the blood drive, voting, neighborhood association meeting, yard sale, bazaar. If there's people coming on your property who are not members, then these kind of things can be helpful to get the story across. You don't overdo it. Assertive, not aggressive. Now, I know one of the first things people think is that these photos, that's wonderful, but we can't do them. That's too expensive. Well, actually, you're probably going to get them for free because, yes, if you go to Staples or Office Depot, they're expensive. But these large printers are now pretty ubiquitous, and they're all over the place. And engineers, architects, graphic designers, electric company all have these printers. And there's a good chance if you called one of them up and said, look, I'm from the local church. We need 2 large photographs printed. Can you do it? There's a pretty good chance they're going to go ahead and do it. You just have to ask. So how do we get their contact information? And I'm going to say again, assertive, never aggressive. But I'm also going to say you get nothing when you ask for nothing. And this is stewardship season. If people have taken any stewardship training, you've heard that. It's Stewardship 101. The asking for something, that's what I mean about being assertive. So, for example, at the bazaar or the yard sale, a leader could take up the microphone once every, 15 minutes, something, depends how long people stick around. We would love to send you occasional updates about what's happening around here. Please complete one of the forms you will find at the checkout or wherever you want to have them. Another thing you can do is you can hold a drawing for prizes with the contact card as the entry form. This works at a lot of different events. But for example, you could just have $5 off at the bazaar. And yes, I hear people screaming already. We've been working so hard on this bazaar to raise money, and now you're giving it away. Well, chances are if you ask around, you can find somebody who would give $50 so you can offer 10 coupons. If not, hopefully you have a small budget you can use somewhere. Yeah, don't take the money directly away from the bazaar, but this is a way. If you offer $5 off, people are going to be filling out those cards in a hurry. At the checkout, have the cards available and offered. The next one, and I got a lot of discussion up this morning on this one, so I'm going to spend a little extra time on it. At every activity, a prayer center. I use the phrase booth. It doesn't have to be a booth. Some place that people can stop and offer prayers, that you will pray with them. I think, I don't know if I think you could have it off in the corner in the narthex where it's visible but not pushy when people are leaving the voting booth. If they want to pray, let them pray. Give people the option of praying right then or using a contact form to write prayer requests. So you would have 2 or 3 people there sitting at a table or whatever. And if someone comes up and wants to be prayed with, you could pray with them. Or you can simply say to them, here, fill out this form, and we will include them in our daily prayers tomorrow. Something like that. When they have done that, follow up within 24 hours with every person who leaves information. That doesn't matter where you got it from. You got it from the contact, the drawing for prizes or you got it from the prayer request. If it's a drawing for prizes, just a note, thank you for being with us. And if you look back at those sample texts I showed you a few minutes ago, you'll see some like that. But have something like that. But on the prayers themselves, I think something like, thank you for honoring us with your prayer. I like that, honoring us, because that's the way I look at it. Somebody asked me to pray, they're honoring me with that. Be careful you get the cards. They're now very valuable. All right, this is the form I recommend, and obviously it can be modified. This is just some ideas. And on the right-hand side, you have this slide, but I can send it to you if you want. On the right-hand side is my suggestions for specifics on the form. On the left-hand side is actually two forms. This is set up to print 4 to page, make it nice and easy. And you'll notice there the big circle is the opt-out option. This is my favorite way for doing it, and you can do it with cup hooks you drill into the back of the pew, or you can do it with the little ones you get that have glue on them, and you can put the cup hooks on it. But it's right there in front of people. It's assertive in the sense it's in front of them, but it's not aggressive. It's not putting it in their hand and pushing them. And I particularly like this for non-Sunday events. If you're having a concert at the church or whatever, this gives people who come for another reason the chance to get on your list and get contacted. Yes, most of them will be used for write notes on by the parents or coloring on by the kids, but it doesn't take you getting many of them back in a year to make it worth the effort. Just a few new, 2 or 3. If I could tell you, and I can't, but if I could guarantee to you that you get 2 or 3 new families this way, you jump on it. We don't know how many you'll get, but there's a possibility you'll get some. The only thing I can guarantee is if you don't make an effort, you won't get any. That's a guarantee. All right, for Sunday mornings, I recommend not focusing on the Narthex guest book. Have it there, because the people who are the duns, who once were active in church and are now thinking about coming back, they're expecting it. So have it there. But for everyone else, and this I picked up off of an evangelical who was talking to me one day, and he said this, and I go, oh my God, you're right. Asking people to sign up as they walk in is like asking for your restaurant rating before they've even seen the menu. They haven't seen anything. Why would they be excited already to sign up? And it's definitely on the aggressive side. People walk in and the usher says, "Oh, here's your bulletin. Please sign the book." That's at least borderline aggressive. But there is a great moment in all of our services, the moment between the peace and the offertory, where you have a couple seconds of confused time, if you will. People are still milling around with the peace, but you haven't actually started. The organist hasn't started the offertory yet. I have there's a YouTube little video I did. It's 32 seconds long of how the officiant might encourage people to fill out the form and do it gently. They have the moment to complete it and place it in the basket for those churches that are still passing the basket, or you tell them how else to hand it in. Every time you do something like this, try to phrase it. If you look back, you'll see the times I've written it out as a gift to them, not something for them to do. We don't say, well, please fill out the form, because then we're telling them to do something. Instead, we say, we would love to share with you things happening around here. Here's what we want to give you. Here's the gift we want to give you. Please complete the form or use the QR code or phone number so we can do that, so we can give you your gift. The QR code, if you're using one, should point directly to where the person needs to go. If you ask them to jump to another page, go to the main page and then move on, you'll lose a third of the people. And landing pages can be simple. It can be great. They're a simple page. It just has all the information they need. This is a landing page for a church in, where is this one? This one in Boulder. A great little landing page. All you needed. I mean, they just took graphics they were already using, created a page on their website, and now their QR code points to this. So if people want to know more about the Blue Christmas service, they just click on the QR code or the address, and there it is. There's all the information they need. Very simple. Took about probably 5 minutes or less to do this. Interact, again, follow up very quickly. I don't like, and again, these are the evangelicals would tell you the people should get a thank you for coming on their way home. I think that's aggressive. I like that evening, but if you're using a paid service, you can easily schedule it. So you write it before you leave church and schedule it to go out that evening, or you leave it before you, while other people are cleaning up the bazaar. Somebody goes off to the side and writes the text. It doesn't take long. So we want to grab their attention and tell their story. And again, I said early on, many people get discouraged because results aren't seen quickly. But if you talk to somebody who's been to business school, they will tell you that a person needs to be touched by a product or a service. That means they have to see about it, learn about it, hear about it, whatever, multiple times before they make a decision. And, notice how often you see the automobile insurance commercials on TV. I hate them. You see them so often. But they're doing two things. One, they're reminding you so over time you got them in mind. And second of all, they want to be in front of you when you need them. Well, we want to do the same thing. And with the negative impressions that churches have, we probably need more touches than, say, automobile insurance. So a certain amount of patience is needed. And these are just some general principles. I already mentioned them, so I'll go through them very quickly. Your eye-catching graphics are essential. So in half a second or less, you get their attention. But use words to explain the graphic if it isn't obvious. In other words, a photo of people around a table tells me nothing other than people were sitting around a table. But if I add the 3 words, asking tough questions, that suggests this is a place I can talk to people. It will be seen on a cell phone most of the time. So always check that whatever you're doing looks good on the cell phone. Banners, yard signs need to be understood when driving 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. And finally, the first scene or slide on a video is all they will see unless it intrigues them enough to click on it. In other words, if that is all they see, they're not going to click on it. On the other hand, if it's something like this, a very welcoming, intriguing slide. Now, this one wouldn't be helpful to the broad population. This is aimed specifically at churches. But, to have something like that, you're going to take a half a second to look at it and find out if this is something you're interested in. In this, you just fly right past it. You never even look. And in YouTube, I like to do mine on YouTube. It gives you the option of putting a thumbnail in there. That way you can pick what shows. Otherwise, YouTube picks a slide they want to put in there. On the tools that we have available, social media is what I call a first-tier tool. In the sense, you put it in front of people. Your website, your YouTube, your Google ads are second-tier tools. They must look for it. Nobody is going to stumble on your website. The only time they're going to see your Google ad is if they're already asking to see something like that. So if you have a Google ad and somebody actually Googles churches in my town, they might see your ad. But that's a tiny fraction of people are going to do that. So I recommend focusing on first tier. You can have a lot of impact for free, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But the advertising options, the paid options, are actually very good. It costs a penny to a penny and a half for every account that sees your post. Now, again, it doesn't mean they're going to pay any attention to it. They might flip right through it, but you have an opportunity to get to them. So if you spend $30, something like 2,000 people will see your ad, will see your post. They're easy to target geographically, so you can keep them. They're not being shown countrywide. They're being shown just in your area. You can target them for interests. So, for example, if you do, and I'm going to talk about this next week, you drew what I call a drive-in Christmas pageant. You can target parents. So parents are the ones that see it. If you're doing a blessing of the animals, you can target pet owners. You can do a lot of that very, very easily. You can use memes, videos, reels, slideshows, photos, and use all these things to tell your story. And the story you want to tell is about your ministries. Now, I want to focus on Nextdoor for just a second. It's a good first tier tool, but they will throw you off if you try to post an ad unless you pay for it. Whereas Facebook, Instagram, you can get away with that a lot easier. Nextdoor, what you have to do, it has to be the tone of neighbor talking to neighbor. So rather than a third party type of thing that says we are having a Christmas pageant on December 20th, you have to say, somebody has to write, I'm so looking forward to the Christmas pageant on December 20th type of thing. So just a little different tone. I'm going to focus on Facebook because what you want to do is do one platform well before starting another. Don't try to learn Facebook and TikTok and X and all at the same time. Do one, the maximum, then move on. Nextdoor is simple enough. I'll leave that off the list as something you can do along with Facebook and Instagram. They're both owned by Meta, so they can overlap, and they will overlap at times. In other words, you can do one thing, it'll show up on both. Again, a key is it must be shown on must be visible on the cell phone, which means very few words. Cell phone, you don't have a lot of space. You got that half a second again. I want you to pay attention for a second to Facebook groups, because this is an opportunity most people miss. In your area, there are a number of groups, usually pretty large or frequently pretty large, that you can post in. You want to follow the rules, find out what's going on, follow the rules, and you want to, if possible, reply to posts by others. So if somebody puts up, I'm starting a new business this week, you post good luck. That makes you a friend, not an advertiser, and that's what they want. So here at that Boulder church I had the landing page from, this is some groups near them. If you look at this one down at the bottom, Lafayette is a town right next to the church. Let me see if I can get a circle there. 13,000 members. If I post on there, I have the potential to be seen by 13,000 people. Here's another group, 7,400. Now, there's probably a lot of overlap, people in both groups. The next one is, I skipped there. The next one there is mamas. This I wanted to show because this is important. Here's a group. Again, if you're going to do something like a Christmas pageant that you're inviting people to participate in, this is the kind of group you want to advertise to, you want to post to, you want to tell about. The LGBTQ plus community is one that's particularly suspicious of churches, again, for good reason. But if you can get in there, get in one of their groups and show that you're not one of their enemies, you can get a lot of a good response from them. And basically how you do it, and it's easiest on the computer. You can do it on your phone, but it's easier on the computer. You go to this little symbol here, which is your group symbol. You go over here and you just type in the name of your town. And then when you've done that, the name of surrounding towns, anything that might identify where you are, and do one at a time, and you will get a list of groups you can look at and decide whether or not you want to be part of that group. Well, this question is interesting. This morning, I've gotten 2 or 3 different people who've written me since this morning's presentation asking me this question. How can I find enough people to do all this? Well, you remember, first of all, you can't do it all. And I'm available if you'd like to get on Zoom or phone or text or whatever. We can chat about priorities for your context. You can tell me about what your context is, and I can give you suggestions for priorities. But you want to build a team, and it's usually better to start by asking for simple things. And I'll have some examples of those in just a moment. If you have Daughters of the King and Brotherhood of St. Andrew, they've taken vows that include evangelism efforts. Use that. Say to them, we're going to give you a way to live up to your vow. Anyone who attended an Episcopal baptism vowed to proclaim by word and example. The Lutheran baptism has similar thought, little different words. Shut-ins and partial shut-ins can do virtually all of what I've said, and many are looking to help their church. Most of us have people who, when we visit them, say they used to be very active, they can't be anymore, and they're very sad they can't help their church. Well, here's some ways they can. And a lot of those people are on Facebook keeping up with their grandchildren. They'll tell you first off, oh, I can't do any of that. And then you ask them, well, do you ever get on Facebook? Oh, yeah, I'm on Facebook all the time. They have all the skill they need. They may need just a tad bit of training. So focusing on Facebook, continuing to focus, there's a tool that most people aren't even aware of that can be very powerful, but it has to be used with care, probably no more than once a month. And that's if you put in your text or your first comment at everyone, if you're working in a group, that goes to all 7,400 people in that group. Or otherwise, all it gets is maybe 10% of the group would see it. Then if you're on a personal profile page, and some churches have personal profile pages rather than business pages, that's okay. It's at followers. And on the business page, which is what most churches have, it's at friends. Those go to a whole lot more people. But as I said, if you're not careful, you'll be seen as spam, and you will either be ignored or you'll be thrown off. So use it very seldom. Okay, here's where you can ask. I mentioned earlier, ask for simple tasks. Well, one very important but very simple one is this one right here. When your church publishes something, have a team that's committed to comment and share on the post. Ask them if they would invest 2 minutes a day, or 2 minutes a week, rather, to help in their church. That expands your reach dramatically, and it doesn't cost anything. It expands it in a couple ways. Their friends see it, but more importantly, Facebook says, hey, this is interesting. I'm going to show it to a lot more people. Facebook discovers what's interesting by how many people comment and share. The terminology that's used is engage. How many people engage with a post? I mentioned Reels before. These are short vertical videos, and they're really important to Facebook right now. They're showing them a lot, and it's a great way to tell your story and end up inviting people. And Facebook events are very simple to get the word out, and Facebook shows them a lot more than a simple post. So I'll go back to Reels for a second. Basically, what's happening is Meta is trying to outdo TikTok. All right, TikTok became very popular. Meta says, oh, we can't have somebody else in this business. We're going to take it back over. Well, Reels are their version of TikTok. It's basically TikTok just shown on a different platform. And I know some of the people watching this have no idea what I'm talking about with TikTok, but they're little short videos. And so what Met is doing is showing them to as many people as they possibly can to try to make them look better than TikTok. And it's about 90 seconds. Make sure you mention and write out the location of your church, because Meta uses AI to look for that kind of thing and then decide where to show it. Again, remember, your viewer must be intrigued by the very first screen. So have an image that's intriguing, and it doesn't hurt to have a couple words of text on it, not much. Do a few easy ones before trying the fancier stuff. Just keep it simple. You can film it on your camera and just post it. It's that simple. And the best tutorials I know, which try to keep it simple, are these two. And I want to share with you. They're not ones I did. They were done by another gentleman, but he does such good work, I didn't see any reason to try to repeat what he does. Jerry Potter is the one who did them. He's my go-to guy. He's the person that does the best that I have seen online about trying to explain all this stuff. He works with small companies, small businesses. So what I do a lot of times is try to translate what he's teaching into how it works for us in the church. But if you're interested, most of his stuff is free, or a lot of his stuff is free. You can subscribe, and he's always putting out new things. Chances are, if you go on YouTube and you say Jerry Potter and a topic, he's done a video on it. I mentioned Facebook events. This is one. If you want to look at a church that does posting and events very well, that's this church. They do an excellent job with it. They're a church that, when I first met them a couple of years ago, had 15 on a good Sunday, and they're up over 30 now. Look at that either way. 30 is still small, 100% increase. I like to look at it as a 100% increase. But you can see what you can do. And down here on the description, again, the first sentence, notice how well they do it. Our pets are important parts of our lives. If I have a pet, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm interested now. So it could have started out by saying on, let's see, when was it? Sunday, November 1st at noon, we will be, you lost them by that point. You got to tell them why they're interested in knowing what time and place it is. These, I mentioned memes. If you go in and you Google or whatever, search for Episcopal memes funny, you'll find hundreds. Important to think about your audience. Some of them work very well in your newsletter because your audience is Episcopalians there. For example, there's a number of them about what do women now wear in the church, and it's a female bishop with a mitre on. That's great for our members, but for somebody who doesn't have any idea what a bishop is, that isn't very helpful. Something like this, though, very much is. And in a text, you want to bring it back to your church. Join us in the Episcopal zone. Very simple, very simple. I mentioned doing your own videos. They could be, excuse me, they could be videos or could be slideshows. I'm beginning to believe slideshows are easier. There are times where videos work better, but a lot of times a slideshow is just easier to do and accomplishes the same thing. One I strongly recommend you start on is what is communion. And this is important to do it in your church, so people are seeing your church and your people. And I have an outline on how to do it. Tells you what photos to take. I'll suggest some text to go along with the photo. Easy to do. Introducing our clergy, particularly in small churches. If you have 500 people there on Sunday and somebody walks in, they don't expect to get to know the person up front. I mean, it just common sense. But most of our churches here are small. And if I walk in and there's 30 on a Sunday, I expect I'm going to get to know the leader. All right. So we want to introduce them. And I've got an outline on this too, because I'm suggesting a way that's probably not what you would immediately think about, but I think it works better. Then your ministries, the feeding the hungry, serving the poor, whatever. Holy Week, I have a whole series of videos you can use for each of the days of Holy Week. Episcopal jargon can actually be a good reason to do a video, or in this case, you could do a reel. What are some of the funny words Episcopalians use? That kind of thing. Tri-Tank, and I gave you their YouTube address there. It has some excellent videos you can use. Most of them are right at 2 minutes. The one, What is Sin, has got the most viewings of anything I have done. It generated a whole lot of interest. I mean, that's the kind of thing people want to know about. And you can personalize them, and I can show you how. The goal is to correct those negative impressions people have. I'm going to skip that one for the moment. When you do a video, make sure that fairly early on you include an invitation. Typically, even with those 2-minute short videos, you lose about half your viewers at the 30-second mark. So you want to make sure that by the time they get to 30 seconds, they've been invited. Don't count on them watching the whole thing. In this case, we've invited them to communion, and then we tell them when it's going to happen. Streaming services, which most of us are doing now, and we ghost them. We do a terrible job. And here we do a terrible job. People are watching, and it's as if we don't care about them. It's very easy to add banners, text to the screen. And the nice part about it is once you create a banner, and I'll show you some samples in just a second, it's a simple on-off button. You just say, let's say the banner is welcoming them to come and take communion whenever they're there physically. You push on, and 30 seconds later, you push off, and it ends. You can create these using any graphics program. I happen to like Canva, but there's plenty of them out there. Photoshop can do it. Or you can do it directly with this program, OBS. And again, I'm not making any money on any of this. In fact, OBS is free, so I couldn't make any money anyway. It's easy to learn and use. And Tri-Tank was nice enough that when I talked to him about it, OBS, if you go online, and what does OBS stand for? Open Broadcasting System, I think. Open Broadcast System. If you go online and say tutorial for OBS, you'll get some really detailed tutorials, which are so confusing, they'll drive you crazy and you'll give up. I asked Tri-Tank, and they did. They put together this little short tutorial, which was designed by a small church person. So hopefully it's a lot easier. I am not an expert in it, but I've managed to do some work on it. So again, if you have questions, ask me. If I don't know the answer, I can put you in touch with somebody who does. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say banners. This might have gone up during the piece, for example. We would love to keep in touch with you, keep in touch with other things happening, no spam. Here's how you do it. If this was during the piece, I would have put peace be with you above it or somewhere. This is the request for donation. And let me point out that the fonts, I threw this together in a couple minutes. It's that easy. And the fonts are not really good. There are better ways to show them up. You see how they kind of fade into the background in places. There's easy ways to correct that. This is the one inviting people to receive communion when they're with us physically, letting them know that they are invited. The inactive Roman Catholics don't know they can have their sacraments with us. And Methodists that are splitting off their church, if their church has left to join the international group, they might want to be looking for another church. They don't know about our communion. So that's the good reason to have that little 2-minute slideshow I mentioned, but also to have this on our slides. And then at the end, I would definitely do something like this where it's bold and everything to thank you for worshiping with us. That's what we want them to leave with. Recognizing that most viewers would have tuned off by the time you got to the closing hymn. But that's all right. If one's still watching, we want to do it for the one. Boy, that title got small, didn't it? I don't know why. Non-social media. Don't give up. Don't think, I know the feeling is only the large conservative churches get press coverage. Well, that's because only the large conservative churches ask for press coverage. So, and I've got a model press release and instructions on how to do it well that has worked in a number of places. I'd be happy to send to you. One of the keys to remember is when you do a press release, the editor who will decide if this makes the publication is your audience. It isn't the ultimate audience, it's the editor. And so you need to grab that editor's attention in just a half a second. Now, I'll count on submitting 7, 8, 9, 10 for everyone that's covered. Now, that may be 4 on the same event to 4 different publications. But the point is, everything you do isn't going to get covered. Don't give up. Local weeklies are your best option, and I talk a lot about that in the mailing I have if you want it. The thing to remember about your weeklies are they probably have 2 to 3 people working for them at a maximum, and then they use some stringers, some people that just get paid for each article that they do. So the closest you can give to them that they can simply publish it. Write your own article and send it to them, and there's a good chance they'll publish it just as you wrote it or with minor changes. But don't ignore television, especially in small to medium markets. Television is always looking for that feel-good local story. All right? This is a chance for us to get in there. Now, the bad news is if there's a major accident on the highway, your chance of being covered drops because they have you on a maybe list. Maybe we'll go out to that church and view their thing. And if there's nothing else happening, we'll go out. But we had one case, just everything fell together. We had 4 TV stations show up for one event at one of the churches. That's just, amazing. We figured we got over 1 million households saw that story, and we didn't spend a penny on it. Don't ignore radio, although I put this lower on the priority list. Make sure there's stations you want to be associated with. Some of the stations, this will be just about exclusively AM stations. Our stations I don't want my church name next to. But this is a good task, again, for a shut-in to go through the local stations and listen to them long enough to decide if this one that fits your church. And I know tens of thousands of people are not listening to those AM stations. It's only hundreds. But again, if you can put your event in front of hundreds of people without spending any money, that's pretty good. Don't ignore your daily papers. Send them the same information. Many of them, they're still trying to figure out how to operate in this new world. And many of them are shifting their emphasis away to some extent from national and international news, which they can't compete with CNN. They can't compete with Fox News, online. So they're shifting back to more local news. So don't pass up on that opportunity. And most of these announcements are event focused. We're going to tell you about something, but look for ways to tell your story. In other words, if you want to get out the fact that you have a food pantry or that you deliver food, just sending out a news release that says we have a food pantry, you'll get 0. But if you send out something that says Bob Jones is delivering his 1,000th bag of groceries, then you might possibly get some coverage. I think there's a chance. Finally, the Postal Service, we've all gotten those postal patron cards with our mail. Well, what they call it is EDDM, two Ds, every door direct mail, I think. We can do that. It's expensive, but if for some reason you want to focus on one specific area, one specific neighborhood, that's worth thinking about. You're talking about hundreds of dollars probably. You're talking about something between 50 and 70 cents per household. But you are talking about something that's very direct. So I just wanted to mention that. Most of us can't even think about affording that, but it is a tool. Banners, yard sales, posters, your outdoor sign. Banners and yard sales must be readable at 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. Few words, need graphics. Phrase it so you can reuse it next year. If you have, ice cream social this Saturday, and you just put it up, or this coming Saturday, and you put it up on the Sunday before, that's probably enough visibility, 6 days, and you can just use it again next day. Or you can just next year, or you can just change the date. That banner I showed you early on, if you look really carefully, you'll see the service time changed. We just changed service time, put another piece on top of it. Yard sales you can put at appropriate places if you're doing something involving children, child care centers. Many of them don't have any objection to you doing that. School car pill lines, another good place. And with the election today in many locations, if you want to think about doing yard signs at some point, save yourself some money. About half the cost of the yard sign is the frame, the metal frame. So help your town. Go around, pick up election signs that are no longer relevant, recycle the cardboard, and keep the metal. Just don't put them in my garage because my wife is upset at how many are in there already. Banners announce this is an active church. Even if people aren't interested in the event, it says something. But please make sure your banner hangs right. We've all seen the banners that have fallen in, and they're you can barely read them because they're fading in and everything. They're folding in. Make it look good. You're saying something about your church and how it looks. And finally, I've said it before, they know you worship. Don't waste a very valuable resource by announcing what they already know. This is my favorite an installation for banners. They just put their standard information up top, high enough that they can put a banner at the bottom. 2 4x4s held in place. Easy to do, works really well. Now, in your Facebook page itself, I'm going to run through this somewhat quickly. They have chosen to come to your Facebook page, so you have a little more time. The half second was already used up to get them here. So maybe you have 2 seconds. Well, in America, we tend to, except for the Jewish writings, we read from the upper left-hand corner of a page. So that intro, that's the key. That's what you spend your half a second on. This particular one, and we are a vibrant, loving parish, is good. I think people would go, oh, okay, I'm interested in that. Now, you can put a lot more in than that. And I'll show you in a minute where else you can do it. But they also have the terminology is pinned to the top. They have a calendar of events, and they have this little introductory video. Now, if you're looking at this and you look at these possible tabs, okay, we are a vibrant, loving. Okay, I'm interested in this place. I look up at these tabs. Which one are you going to go look at? I think most of us would go to the About one. And this is what most churches have when you click on the About phase? Nothing at all. Or maybe their service times. You don't want it's like somebody walked up to you on the street and said, I'm interested in your church. Please tell me about it. And you turn and walk away. That's basically what we've done. We've walked away from them when they're asking. So use this, focus on ministries. Don't focus on your service times or who your clergy are or anything like that. That information can be at the bottom, but focus on what your ministry, focus on why they want to be interested in you. Chances are your clergy name is not a reason they want to be interested in you. The next one, let me back up here just a second. As I said, the About tab is number one. The research shows the number two is either photos or reviews that people would go to after going to the About phase. And they are very important. Reviews and mentions, get a new one each month. Respond to any negatives. So here's one from a church in North Carolina. If you read the review, it sounds really good. They got a 4.6 out of a possible 5. That's not bad. Incredibly welcoming church. Okay. I don't know that Father Rick has left 3 years ago, but I look up and the date on it is, and I just copied this a couple days ago. The date on it is 2017. It's 6.5 years old. The last person that reviewed their church was 6.5 years ago. And if you look below, the one before that was 5 years before that. Try to get new reviews focused on ministry as much as possible. Try to get go for one a month from your own people, and with luck, you'll get some from other people too. But you should have one a month minimum. Oh, the other thing, and it was pointed out this morning, Google Maps and the various mapping systems online, if you click on those, a lot of them have information about what you're clicking on. It's similar to the About tab on Facebook. So watch for that and make sure you fill that information in. Again, we're looking at 5-10 minutes. We're not talking about a lot, and one time. Now, nothing I've talked about deepens a person's spiritual life. We're talking about creating the atmosphere. There are some good resources that go beyond this on the episcopalchurch.org main page under evangelism. They have some excellent resources. But I want you to remember, you're not going to do everything. Do one thing well rather than 3 things poorly. And that you're never alone. And I'm more than happy to talk with you about brainstorming priorities. So what's first priority? Pray. Prayer is always number one. And not pray that those people be changed, but pray we be changed to do the ministry God has in mind for us. These are some of the things I'll talk about next week. If you're interested, if you have something you're interested in doing or do that's not on this list, please let me know and we can add it to the list. And finally, your homework for this week, and you can do all this in a very short period of time. But if you're doing Facebook, and I can send you a how-to video if you don't already have a Facebook page, make sure that the intro and the About tab are intriguing and focused on ministry. 10 minutes. Go ahead and try to get 2 to 5 people who promise to pledge and share, remembering shut-ins. Look for and join all local groups. That might take you an hour. Recruit a person to be in charge of posting to those groups, and it could be one of the ones who are commenting and share. And then second of all, create the follow-up system. How will you contact? How are you and how will you improve your contact for when people leave you their contact information? You want to be able to contact them immediately and stay in touch. All right. Well, I ran over a couple minutes. I apologize for that. But but I know some people probably have to leave, but if you'll unmute yourself and if you need to leave, I certainly understand. But other than that, who has a comment, question, clarification?
Ken?
Yeah.
Ken, I wanted to put in the things from this morning that I thought might interest people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Please.
the first one is if you're going to do the big posters and put them up, somebody had commented that if you're not really good at taking pipe and making something to hang them, there are hangers you can get on Amazon. The brand is HONOSON. And they said they had multiple kinds, but that brand was 5 hangers for $50, which is $10 a piece, which is not too bad. And the other thing I wanted to mention, if you wanted to go, I stepped out a couple of times. I didn't hear you mention putting the contact cards on the back of the pews.
I showed the photo.
Okay. Well, if you want to do that, one of the best ways is command hooks, and they're 10 for $12.92 at Amazon. So, they're not expensive either. And the command hooks will be good for all those people who go, you're not doing anything to our pews. Our pews have been here since 1812, that kind of thing. They won't damage anything. So anyway, those were my 2 comments I wanted.
Good. Thank you. Others?